a lot of sadness, but a lot of anger as well. And there are a few things that have made me more angry than the double standards and the hypocrisy that we've seen in our politicians, in our media, in our academic institutions, in our medical institutions. And they haven't reported stuff, they haven't told us the truth about what's going on. They've all failed Gaza, they've all failed the Palestinians, and they are all complicit in the genocide that is still continuing there.
Shame!
Now, a couple of weeks ago, we all saw the horrific news on the television and in the papers about the Russian military bombing of the children's hospital in Kiev, and quite rightly, everyone was horrified and everyone spoke up about it. Sorry. What did our Prime Minister, our new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, say? And I'll quote him. He was horrified by attacking innocent children. He described it as the most depraved of actions. What did The Guardian, our left-wing newspaper, the media outlet that's most likely to support the Gazans, what did they say? They said there are no words for this massacre and expressed the appalling horror over the Russian bombing of these children. What did Keir Starmer say about the 15,000 children who have been murdered in Gaza? He condoned the siege. He condoned the deprivation of water and food and electricity from Gaza. What did The Guardian say about the children who've been killed in Gaza? When Al-Shifa Hospital was targeted and destroyed and hundreds of innocent people killed, they said they actually said the IDF, but of course we don't use that term, do we? The IOF says it has entered Gaza's Al-Shifa Hospital in a targeted operation against Hamas. In Ukraine, we're told that children are being horrifically murdered. In Gaza and the West Bank, we're being told that people under 18 have died. Who remembers the babies who were found rotting in the neonatal care unit of the NASA medical complex when the fuel was cut off? Was that reported?
No!
What about the children dying in Rantisi Children's Hospital in Gaza? Was that reported? The world has been silent about the atrocities in Gaza, and as I said before, the government, the media, the institutions are all complicit in the genocide. The death toll in Gaza is 15 times greater than that in Ukraine. We've heard about 15,000 children have been killed. Anyone who has been in Gaza knows that number is a gross underestimate. There have been more children murdered in Gaza in the last 9 months than in all the conflicts in the world in the last 5 years.
Shame!
There's been an average of 70 children, 70 children killed in Gaza every day since October the 7th. In Ukraine, there has been an average of 0.7 children killed per day. In Iraq, the figure was 0.6 children. In Syria, 2 children per day. In Gaza, 70 children killed on average every single day since October the 7th. There's an acronym that I had to use when I was in Al-Aqsa Hospital in Gaza, and that is used every single day, and it's WCN WSF. And that stands for Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. There are 30,000 children in Gaza who are alone, with their parents either being killed or they've been separated from their children. There are 2,500 children, and counting, who've had traumatic amputations of one or more limbs. There are more than 1 million children, and this is a UNICEF figure, there's more than 1 million children in need of mental health and psychosocial support. 96% of children under 2 are not getting enough nutrition. More than 50,000 children are so malnourished that they need acute medical treatment for their malnutrition. Food will not be good enough for them. They need medical care now. Let me tell you about a few children that I came across and treated. There was Allah, a 6-year-old boy who was found abandoned on the floor of the waiting room of Al-Aqsa Hospital on a particularly busy day in January when I was there. He was nearly dead. He had a hole in his chest. He had a hole in his head. Both of his parents had been killed. His sister, Aya, was also there. She had a badly fractured leg. Her leg was so displaced that the blood supply had been cut off to her foot. So that leg needed to be straightened straight away. This was a day in Al-Aqsa Hospital, like most days, when we had completely run out of all strong painkillers. There was no morphine to give any of these patients. And I will forever remember Aya having her leg straightened by the orthopedic surgeon in order to restore the blood supply with no pain relief at all. And I will never forget her screams. Let me tell you about Samaya, who came in 3 hours later. Another bombardment of Nusrat camp. She had burns. She was 8 years of age, again by herself, parents killed. She had burns that were so bad on her face that we could see her facial bones through the burnt flesh. She was never going to survive. She wouldn't have survived in Cork, in Oxford, anywhere in the world. So all we could do was try and palliate her and let her die in comfort and in peace. But we couldn't do that. There was no pain relief to give her, and there was no privacy. So she died a very slow death, lying on the floor of the waiting room of Al-Aqsa Hospital, in agony and screaming. Let me tell you about Ziki. There's a video that's gone viral over the last few days, and you can see it on Twitter all over the place. Ziki was a young boy of about 9 who I knew very well. His whole family was killed in the first week after October the 7th, and he's been living in the grounds of Al-Aqsa Hospital ever since. He has got no relatives. He now helps the paramedics. He goes out in the ambulances to the bomb sites. He helps pick up the patients. He helps take them to theatre. He came on the ward rounds with us. He helped move the patients between wards into the operating theatre. Imagine what is in front of him for the rest of his life. No family, and he spent 9 months dealing with nothing but death and serious injury. You may be familiar with Hind, who's a very well-known journalist in Gaza, who I know very well, and she messages me most days. She is based at Al-Aqsa Hospital, and she told me only about 4 days ago about the latest bombing of the school in Nusrat camp, and she described how children were being brought in dead and in pieces. Some children with no heads, many children with at least 1, 2, if not 3 limbs amputated. I'm going to finish up by referring briefly to the Lancet paper, which I know one of the earlier speakers spoke about. We've heard about the fact there's nearly 40,000 deaths in Gaza, and we all know that is a gross underestimate. There are many thousands of people still buried under the rubble, including people I've known for years. Those figures of 39,000 only refer to those who were killed immediately by bombs or gunshots. It doesn't include people who have been identified. It doesn't include people buried under the rubble. It doesn't include people dying 2-3 weeks later from their injuries. And it certainly doesn't include those dying of other diseases. We became very familiar with the term excess deaths during the COVID pandemic. Those were deaths due to other diseases other than COVID because they weren't being treated. The excess deaths, the Lancet paper predicts, will be at least 186,000. These are people dying of infectious diseases. These are people dying of cancer. Cancer's not only not being treated, it's not being diagnosed. Heart disease, kidney failure, liver failure, acute respiratory tract infections, strokes, heart attacks. These are not being treated and people are dying with them. So that figure is approaching 10% of the population of Gaza. I mentioned last time I was here about the malnutrition, and that to me is the biggest danger facing the population of Gaza now. There is a famine in northern Gaza. There is severe malnutrition in the rest of Gaza. And we will see many, many more excess deaths as a result of malnutrition. I started this talk by talking about the many emotions we all here go through. And being in Gaza, seeing these atrocities exacerbates, makes those emotions even worse. But one of them, and one of the emotions that I feel increasingly, is a sense of privilege to have actually been able to go out there and help. But more importantly, to be able to be there and bear witness to the wars, to the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, the genocide that has been carried out. And we heard the great news about the ICJ recognizing the apartheid state that exists in Palestine. And we hear that we know that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, using a lot of evidence given to them by people who witnessed these crimes in Gaza. We know they have applied to the court to press charges, and we hear that that will be agreed within the next 2 weeks. And the charges, and those war criminals, such as Netanyahu and his colleagues, will be charged. Thank you very much indeed.